Today we're going to look into what's the meaning of 666, which is found only in the book of Revelation. So let's turn the Bible to the book of Revelation, chapter 13, and look at verse 18. Now I must tell you, to fully understand the book of Revelation, one has to know the Old Testament well. That's Psalms, knowing the book of Isaiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Zechariah, Zephaniah. These things are important, and without this background, we can never fully do justice to what we read in the book of Revelation. Of course, people have concocted several stories talking about so-and-so is the beast, and so-and-so is the sea beast, and the land beast, and yet there is so much of confusion. I just want to simply today state what is the 666, or who is the 666, and then we're going to look into what is the meaning of last days, or what does last days mean when you read the Bible. So let's first jump into 666. Revelation 13, verse 18. It says, "This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. Now, I would one day make a video on numbers and what the numbers actually mean in the book of Revelation. But as for now, this is my explanation. The 666 stands for Nero Caesar. And here's what it is. In the Hebrew language, Nero Caesar would be spelled as Caesar, Nero if you want to, would be spelled as QSR, and then Nero would be NRWN. And of course, there's a numerical value given to these letters. The QSR, the Q stands for 100. The S is 60. The R is 200. Then for Nero, NRWN, it would be, again, N is 50, R would be 200, W is 6, and then N is 50. Now if you add them up, it adds to 666. Now the Bible clearly says over here, it's a man. Okay, and it says it calls for wisdom, for the number is that of a man, not a demon or a devil or a beast. It's a man. And so that's where the rest is. Now what in numbers mean, like I said, it will be done in another video. Now let's go in over here and jump right into what is last days, because I hear a lot about coronavirus breakout. Oh, this is the last days and the world is coming to an end. And I believe that as Christians we should study out the Bible carefully and understand what the Bible has to teach. So let's go to Hebrews chapter 1. Hebrews chapter 1, there are several places, last days comes. Like, for example, it comes in the book of Micah, chapter 4, verse 1, Hosea, chapter 3, verse 5, Isaiah, chapter 2, Acts 2:17. But the one we can look today in is Hebrews chapter 1, verse 2. Hebrews 1, verse 2. And I think if you read this carefully, we would make a lot of sense to what the words last day could mean, or where is it pointing towards. Well, let's just go Hebrews 1, verses 1 and 2. In the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, He has spoken to us by His Son, whom He appointed heir of all things, and through whom also He made the universe. Alright, so we find the word last days over here in verse 2. Now, listen carefully to what it says. It says, so God has spoken to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and various ways. So God has spoken many times, several times, and various ways. But in these last days, it says, in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son. Now, I think that we can do a rough calculation. When did the Son come on earth? When did he walk the earth? I think he walked the earth around about 2,000 years ago. So, if we were to ask the question, when did the last days begin? Then according to the scriptures, the last days began during the time of God's Son. In other words, it began during the time of Jesus Christ. All right, so let's not say that the last days have begun now, or for some reason people feel that in the year 2000 was the last days. I remember a lot of hype going on during that time. But that's not when the last days, if you want to know when the last days started, when it began, it's about 2,000 years ago. Oh, we have all of us are living in the last days for the last 2,000 years. So, there is nothing to get excited about that this is the last day, the last days have come. The last days have been going on since Jesus came on earth. So, I hope that takes away the confusion that all of a sudden, because of a pandemic, now we are living in the last days, and now this will pass away by, I believe, 2022. Then you go, oh, another one coming in 2030 maybe. And, oh, last days. No, these are not the last days. Last days have been going on for quite a long time. Right. Now, I do want to talk a little bit more about last days, and I think it's also associated with the day of the Lord. And I think many times the day of the Lord, they feel, is the time that God's going to come and everything's going to be swept away and gone. But I want us to get the right meaning or the right understanding of that phrase, the day of the Lord. So there are several examples in the Bible. You'll find it in Isaiah and many different chapters of Isaiah. But we will look at just one chapter, Isaiah chapter 13. So let's go to Isaiah 13. Isaiah 13. And I wanted to read 6, 9, and 13, just to get an idea of what's going on over here. 6, 9, and 13. 6 says, wail, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come like destruction from the Almighty. Let's move up to 9. See, the day of the Lord is coming, a cruel day, with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land desolate and destroy the sinners within it. Let's go to verse 13. Therefore, I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will shake from its place at the wrath of the Lord Almighty in the day of his burning anger. All right, so the day of the Lord. Well, the day of the Lord is also equated to on that day or in that day. And so we understand the day of the Lord is the day the Lord will come to judge. In that day is the day that we're going to have judgment. I think most of the people got this right. Day of the Lord in that day or on that day is a judgment day. But here's something to understand. When we read this, we go, oh, judgment is coming. But I think we should always look at the context to what is going on. For example, in Isaiah 13, if you just scroll up to verse 1 and read it, it says, a prophecy against Babylon that Isaiah, son of Amos, saw. Well, what is going on over here? It's a prophecy against Babylon, against the king of Babylon. So, whose judgment is going to come? Well, the judgment is going to be against the Babylonians. All right? So, and God was talking over here saying that your day is going to come. Your day is coming. And in that day, Babylon is going to be judged. And I think it's very important to read the context and go, because in that day, on that day, the day of the Lord could not necessarily mean the final judgment of everything. When we read the Bible, the context points us to a direction and tells us, well, this day is actually for the Babylonians. Well, do we have any other examples in the Bible? Of course we have several examples in the Bible. Okay, now you can do a little research. Go to Isaiah 19 and you'll find again, the day of the Lord, in that day examples. You go to Isaiah 22, Isaiah 27. You find again in that day. But so how many times is God saying in that day? Well, every time God says it, it is for a different person. It's for a different empire. It's for a different kingdom. And the context describes us that for that kingdom, for that king, that's the end. I mean, his judgment is coming. God's going to come and judge that person. In other words, that kingdom or the king is going to be destroyed. So I hope you understand when we read on that day or in that day or the day of the Lord, I hope we come to a right conclusion by reading at the context whose end is coming. Let's go to Mark chapter 13. I think this is an interesting passage because many times when we read Mark chapter 13, it's an interesting read. When you read it, it seems as though Jesus is talking about the end. I mean, the final day of judgment. This is when everything is going to end. It seems that way, but we will pay careful attention to what Jesus is trying to describe over here. So let's go to Mark chapter 1, and I want to just read the entire chapter 1 to verses 1 to 37, just to get the flow of it. Okay, Jesus was leaving the temple. One of the disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what massive stones! What magnificent buildings! Do you see all these great buildings?" Replied Jesus. "Not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." Okay, so Jesus saying, "Oh, do you see these buildings?" He says, not one stone will be left on another. Keep in mind, a stone at that time would be that of a 737 Boeing. I mean, these are big, massive stones. It's not easy to take down one from top of the other. All right. Verse 3. As he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us when these things will happen, and what will be the sign that they are all about to be fulfilled?" So they have a very simple question. Tell us, when will these things happen? Question. What things will happen? Well, not a stone on top of the other one. That thing. All right, so in other words, the destruction of the temple. Okay, so that is the question. So the question is, when will the temple be destroyed? Okay, let's read further now. Jesus said to them, "Watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, claiming I'm he, and will deceive many. When you hear of wars and rumors of war, do not be alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come." Okay, so there's an end to come. Okay, now again the question is, whose end? Or what's end? Well, Jesus answered the question, the end of the destruction of the temple. That end. It certainly cannot mean the end of the world. But let's say, let's assume probably it's the end of the world, and let's keep reading then. Verse 8. "Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places and famines. These are the beginning of birth pains." People go, "Oh, you can see it now. Nations are against nations and kingdom against kingdom." Well, tell me, when did this nation against nation ever stop for the past 2,000 years? Has it stopped? Or the kingdom against kingdom? It's always been there. Always been there. Even before Jesus, it's been there. Are you with me? So I think we should stop and give thought to what is Jesus saying. Is it only now we have nations against nations? Oh no, we have always had nations against nations. Is it only now we have kingdom against the kingdom? Oh no. We've always had kingdoms against, even pre-Jesus times we had kingdoms against kingdoms. Let's continue reading. Verse 9. You must be on your guard. You will be handed over to the local councils and flogged in the synagogues. Okay. To whom is Jesus talking to? Well, if I were to read the context, he's talking to Peter, James, John, and Andrew. He's telling them that they will be flogged in the synagogue. On account of me, you will stand before governors and kings as witnesses to them. And the gospel must first be preached to all nations. Whenever you are arrested and brought to trial, do not worry beforehand about what to say. Just say whatever is given to you at that time, for it is not you speaking, but the Holy Spirit. Again, is Jesus talking to us? No. In context, he's talking to these 4 guys. 12. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child. Children will rebel against the parents and have them put to death. Everyone will hate you because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. Is it talking about you and me over here? No. Jesus is talking to the 4 guys over there who asked him a very specific question. When you see the abomination that causes desolation, we shall talk about this in another video, but let's carry on. Standing where it does not belong, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. So Jesus being very, very specific. He is talking about a specific geographical area, Judea. And he talks about fleeing to the mountains. Now if you read history, you do understand that the apostles, they went to Pella, and they went there because when problems started for the Jews, and they saved themselves, and then they started to teach about Christianity right where they went and settled. So we know this actually took place. They fled. Let's continue reading. Verse 15. Let no one on the housetop go down or enter the house to take anything out. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that this will not take place in winter, because those will be days of distress unequaled from the beginning, when God created the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If the Lord had not cut short those days, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, whom he has chosen, he has shortened them. At that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Messiah, or look, there he is, do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. So be on your guard. I have told you everything ahead of time. Verse 24. But in those days, following the distress, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time people will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory, and he will send his angels and gather his elect from the 4 winds, and from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heaven. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and the leaves come out, and know that summer is near, even so when you see these things happening, you know that it is near, right at the door. Verse 30, it is of interest for us. Let's pay attention. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. All right. Now Jesus is saying over here, now doesn't matter what we get out of all those, nation against nation, kingdoms against kingdom, the sun darkened, moon will not give its light. Okay, all of them have explanations. But no matter how we understand that, no matter how we go about it, we got to pause and at verse 30 and go, Jesus tells them, I tell you, this generation, a generation is about 40 years, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Until what things have happened? all that we have read from verses 1 all the way to verse 29. Wow. So what Jesus is saying is all these things have to take place in this generation, before this generation passes away. In other words, within 40 years of time. So, in other words, I believe that generation has passed away. Okay, we are like in 2020. Okay, so all of those generations are gone. So according to Jesus, and Jesus is not lying, can't be a liar, according to him, all these things has to have happened, should have taken place, should have, must have. Otherwise Jesus turns out to be a liar. Must have taken place. And I say it did take place. It must take place. Irrespective of whether we understand this passage correctly or not, these things had to have happened. Ought to have happened. It's done. It's over. Verse 30 says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. So Jesus is very, very clear that these things have already happened. Okay, now of course many people think that this is the second coming, and I must say they are absolutely wrong. It cannot be the second coming. Just a side note, the first coming of Jesus, people had problem to understand that he was God. He had to do several signs and wonders to make people put faith in him that he is actually from God. Okay, the first coming was a big problem for people to digest and understand. Yeah, he's God. Even Peter betrayed him 3 times. Okay, the first coming is already confusion. And you telling me now Jesus is talking about the second coming? No, it's not. It's not about the second coming. It is somebody has put in our heads that this is the second coming, but it is not. Carefully reading the passage tells us, no, it is not second coming. One of the things I want to just say a little bit, and of course we're going to have a part 2 of this, and that's for sure. But I just want to conclude. But I want to tell us and make us understand that when you hear things like the sun is darkened, the moon is darkened, does not give its light out, these are not just found in Matthew and Mark. No, sir. These are concepts that Jesus is using from the Old Testament. Let me give you an example. Isaiah chapter 13. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 13. In Isaiah 13, let's look at verse 10. The stars of heaven and the constellations will not show their light. The rising sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. Oh, it's there in Isaiah chapter 13. And again, when you hear this, it is about God bringing people to a judgment. And like we already saw in Isaiah 13 before, that this is actually written to Babylon king. I mean the king of Babylon. That's what this is written to, and it's a word against him. Look into Nahum chapter 1. Nahum chapter 1. We read from verse 3 onwards. The Lord is slow to anger, but great in power. The Lord will not leave the guilty unpunished. His way is in the whirlwind and the storm, and the clouds are the dust of his feet. He rebukes the sea and dries it up. He makes all the rivers run dry. Bashan and Carmel wither, and the blossoms of Lebanon fade. The mountains quake before him, and the hills melt away. The earth trembles at his presence, the world and all who live in it. Who can withstand his indignation? Who can endure his fierce anger? His wrath is poured out like fire. The rocks are shattered before him. Great language. This is again about judgment. Now again, whose judgment? Let's read further, we get the idea. Verse 7. The Lord is good, a refuge in times of trouble. He cares for those who trust in him. But with an overwhelming flood, he will make an end of Nineveh. There you go. He'll make an end of Nineveh. Oh, so this Nahum is a prophecy against the people of Nineveh, because they won't repent. So judgment was coming to Nineveh. And so when we read the passage, it tells us what is happening. And so Lord coming in clouds, and Lord, the sun becoming dark, the moon losing its light, it is a form of speech All right, and this is pointing towards, and so we have to see, all right, against whom is God coming? Against whom is God angry and bringing them to an end and bringing a destruction to them? I hope so far you're able to kind of understand and grasp, especially the meaning of last days or in the day of the Lord, because these are terms means the Lord is bringing somebody to to a judgment. He's judging people, and it is our duty to read the Bible carefully and come to an understanding against whom is this being spoken. So we saw a sample against the king of Babylon. We saw in Nahum it's against the Ninevites, and then in Matthew, of course, and Mark, when you read, especially Matthew 13 we read today, is against the Jews. And the judgment did come because in 70 AD the temple was destroyed. Not one stone was left on top of the other. Thank you so much. We'll meet again.